Valerie Trouet is a world-renowned dendrochronologist from Belgium. She reads the past and the future of a tree, of the climate, and therefore of humankind in the yearings trees produce. She's not, by her own admission, a tree hugger, but she does love trees. She's a professor at the University of Arizona, and she's recently published a book, Tree Story, about the art and especially the science, of course, of reading trees. Valerie Trouet, thank you very much for joining us for this series of conversations we're having with people about repairing the future. We're seated here in the beautiful venue of the Henri Leboeuf Saal at BOZAR. Thank you so much for joining us. And if I may start by asking, from where are you joining us?
Well, Elise, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's really my honor. I'm currently in Florida, in Sarasota, Florida, so on the Gulf Coast. And when the coronavirus outbreak hit here, I drove from Tucson to Florida, which is about a 3-day drive, to be with my partner and my stepdaughter who live here in Florida.
So you work now from Florida, or are you taking a break from work?
No, the university is basically closed until the start of the fall semester, which in Arizona happens in late August. So in mid-March, all classes went online and no one went into the lab, basically. So I've been working from home, and I figured that home could be in Florida as well as in Tucson, Arizona.
But your life is different under lockdown compared to how it is normally?
Very much so, yeah. As for everyone, it's been an adjustment to take everything online, meetings, teaching. Our fieldwork, we were planning on doing fieldwork in China this summer. That's been canceled. So now we have to figure out how what we're going to be doing next fall without those samples and so forth. So there's a lot of adjustments. But compared to, here in the US, it's now I think more than 20 million people who have filed unemployment. I feel very privileged that it's just an adjustment and not more than that.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk more about that later. To begin with, maybe, do explain, what does a dendrochronologist do exactly?
Good question. We study the rings in trees to look at the climate of the past, or at human history of the past, or at ecosystems of the past, and how these are linked. So we look at the history of climate and humans. So for that purpose, we measure the widths of the rings in trees, and that can be living trees, but that can also be dead trees or archaeological material. Anything that's made out of wood, really, as long as it has enough rings, can be used for the purpose of our science.
And what is it that drives you in this kind of research? Is it curiosity? Is it wanting to curb climate change? Is it the beauty of the trees and the tree rings? Because I've heard you enthuse about the beauty of it, the aesthetics of it. What is it actually?
It's really a combination of all. I mean, it has evolved over time as well. So I started doing this work in the late 90s when we were aware, or at least me, in my early 20s, I was aware of the climate change problems, but they weren't, let's say, as much in your face yet as they are now. And so when I started doing this, frankly, it was out of a sense of adventure. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to travel while doing science. That's how I started this. When we go and collect samples, that is often an adventurous part of our work. But then definitely the scientific curiosity and frankly the feeling of creating new knowledge, of realizing that you just found out something that we didn't know before. I don't know any other feeling like it. That is ultimately what drives me. And to be able to do that while working in the framework of the solutions to climate change, or better understanding climate change, makes it even more relevant to me. So it's not just science for the sake of science, but it's a very relevant problem that we're addressing with it.
Reading your book, I also found there's an aspect of almost Tolkien-like, a Tolkien-like world to it. The oldest trees get names like Adonis and Methuselah. What is it? Are all dendrochronologists romantics, or how does this come about?
I think it is what I mentioned earlier. We study the history, and then the main applications of dendrochronology are climatology, ecology, and archaeology. So our colleagues come from an art history and an archaeology background. We talk to each other, and these stories come about. I think that's one of the aspects I really like about it. It's a very interdisciplinary field.
Yeah, you refer to Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh as well in your book. Is that something you go looking for to understand better what you're studying of a distant past? Or do you read widely and do you just discover these links between some kinds of literature and what you're actually studying right here, right now?
I think it's again a combination. The example of Gilgamesh, that I had not really studied that until I started writing this book. So I was very fortunate. I was on a sabbatical when writing this book, which gave me the time and the space in my head to read broadly and to think about connections between literature and history and my science. But broadly speaking, I am primarily a dendroclimatologist. So my main focus is using tree rings to study the climate of the past. Now, it gets really interesting when we can make links between the climate of the past and human history. But I am not a historian. I can read about human history. But if I really want to do that properly on a scientific level, I collaborate with historians who come in from the historical side of things, and we talk to each other and produce good stories.
Maybe we should explain what Gilgamesh is doing in your story, just to make it concrete.
Definitely. So Gilgamesh is the oldest known literature. It's from around the 3rd millennium BCE, so before Christ. Gilgamesh was a king in Mesopotamia who, with the area in the Middle East at the time, was covered by cedar forests. So it's very hard to imagine now, if you see the images of a desert landscape, that 5,000 years ago, those mountains that are there were covered by cedar trees. And so one of the oldest piece of literature actually describes the deforestation of that cedar forest, how Gilgamesh, the king, in his grandeur, wanted to build a big entryway to a city of Uruk and wanted to build a ship to bring all of his riches to his city. And to do that, he needed wood. So he actually went to the holy cedar forest to cut down, amongst others, the holy tree in the holy forest to make his own grandeur or his own richness more clear. So that is a story that we see.
So we humans have been at it forever. Deforestation is nothing 20th century new kind of 21st century kind of problem. We've always been doing it.
Definitely, and we shouldn't. Wood has also allowed us to build the civilizations that we have built. I mean, deforestation per se, it's not unlike fossil fuels. Without wood, our society as it is now would look very differently. But it's also, it makes sense. It's been a relatively easily accessible resource. You don't need very advanced techniques to cut down a tree. And they are, I wouldn't say everywhere, but they're in very many places. So it makes sense that from the very start, we have been making use of wood for shelter, for cooking, for energy, and so forth.
The combination of deforestation, pandemics, and societal change is also something that throughout history has been happening, apparently from way before the Romans, but it's also inducive, or has been inducive, to the fall of the Roman Empire. It's a case in point in your book. So what are we to conclude? Either is this a good thing, it's something recurrent, but we're still here, or is it a bad thing because apparently as human beings we don't learn and we keep repeating the same mistakes?
Yeah, to me it's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's humanity doing its thing. It's humanity at work. As you mentioned, you could say we don't learn from history, but you could also say we can't escape history. It's when you look at the past, and my focus on the influence of climatic changes in the past. Climatic changes have often had an influence on human societies in the past, but they were never an isolated impact. If I've learned anything from writing this book, is that it's not so much the climatic change that determines whether or not a society falls under its impacts, but it's more the socioeconomic structure of the society and the resilience of the society and how they deal and adapt to this climatic change that determines the outcome. For instance, the ancestral Puebloans in the American Southwest in medieval times, when the American Southwest witnessed some mega droughts, some 50, 60-year-long droughts, their solution to that problem was to move away. It was a very different society, ancestral Puebloans, much less hierarchical, and they, rather than concentrating in the equivalent of what would be modern day cities, they moved away from the area and disbanded in smaller groups. Now, those are things that we don't, at this point, we're not just dealing with climate change. We also have a very densely populated planet. So there's options that were made use of in the past that we don't necessarily have access to now. On the other hand, we have the technological and scientific advances at hand that we've never had in the past. So it's hard to do a one-on-one comparison.
So looking at the situation now, how much time do we still have? Do you believe we can still get a grip?
I think it is very important to realize that there is gradations to the climate change that is lying ahead of us. So it depends a lot on whether, personally, I think staying under that 1.5 degree safe place is going to be very, very difficult to do. But there's 2 degrees, there's 3 degrees, and all of that is better than 4 degrees, is better than 5 degrees, is better than 6 degrees, and so forth. So any advance that we make, any amount of carbon dioxide that we can keep out of the atmosphere or that we can extract out of the atmosphere is better than not.
Mm-hmm. How easy is it to be, or not, how easy or not is it to be a scientist in the US right now, a climate scientist at that?
A woman immigrant climate scientist. I've been fortunate in that I study the climate of the past. which I get the impression I have a little more leeway. I get attacked a little less than others. I've also gone that out of the way in the sense that, yes, my science gets attacked, but or gets questions, or I get pulled into discussions, and I deliberately do not go into that, even when I'm then being told that, I'm not defending myself or not defending my science. I don't feel comfortable doing that. So.
And why is that? Why do you think that's the best option, not to engage?
What's the saying there? It's much easier to produce confusion and fake news, I'll just call it, than to rebuke it. In my experience, a few times that I've either engaged myself or led colleagues of mine that I trust engage in such debates, there's no way that you're going to convince someone of the science or of the facts. There's no winning. It's just eating away at your energy and your time. At this point in time, the people who actively deny that the climate is changing and that we are at the cause of that, and who feel inclined to, for instance, on social media, start those kind of discussions. Those are not people who do that because they don't fully understand it or because they're unsure. 90% of the time, those are people who have no intention of wanting to get to the bottom of it. They have no intention for you to explain things clearly to them.
Mm-hmm. It's that they don't want to know, is what you're saying. It's not because they have no way of knowing or are busy surviving daily life because of dire circumstances. You make this distinction. Am I right?
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So producing science is what you do to push back against people denying climate change. But still, there's the political atmosphere now. Funding is also very important in US academia. Do you feel any impact there?
Yes, yeah, on multiple levels. The University of Arizona is a state university. The state of Arizona is a Republican university and has been defunding its educational system for a while now. So the University of Arizona has seen its budget go down 25% over the last few years, which then means that tuition is increased, which they put the burden on the students. In terms of the National Science Foundation and federal level funding, the impacts have been less severe, so I can't say that I've seen an impact there. But personally, again, yes, it is. It impacts my job, but more importantly, is that to me is that a lot of at this point, addressing climate change needs to, for a large extent, needs to come from policies. We are in urgent need of political incentives to address climate change, of policies to address climate change. And that is what is really being counteracted in the U.S. at the moment. All of the progress that Obama has made in that sense has been ruled back and even gone further back in time than we were 8 years ago. So to me, that is a bigger issue than what I personally experienced in budget cuts limiting my science.
So, apart from the scientific drive and the curiosity, what is it that gives you the energy to go on and to pursue and to hang on in there and do the hard work? What gives you energy Is that music, for example? I noticed that a number, if not all of the chapters are entitled by lines from songs.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I sort of guess that music plays a big part in your life.
Yeah, to me, I mean, it's twofold. One, as you referred to, I very much enjoy listening to music, all kinds, and to me, it reminds me of when I get frustrated by the way that the direction that we as a society are going into. It reminds me of what humanity is also capable of, right? Of what we are also trying to preserve, of what we also can do. You know, we can do this. We can make the most beautiful music that I have no clue how anyone can do it, yet we can. And it's the same with, to be fair, with science. We are at one of the most exciting times that I can think of to be a scientist. We have such a rich data set. We have so much data that we're sitting on that we can work with. We have all the computing power that we can think of. We are in a better position to do top-notch science than we ever were. I mean, if you think of, we sent people to the moon in 1968. Like, the computers then were less than your smartphone now, and they managed to send people to the moon. If we set our mind to it, we can do great things. It's a great time to do science, and same with culture. It's phenomenal. So on the one hand, what keeps me going is reminding myself of what all we as humans as possible are capable of as well. On the other hand, I have to say I love living in Arizona. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's a gorgeous state. The landscapes are phenomenal. You can, go on a road trip and you're at the Grand Canyon in 5 hours from Tucson. I mean, I'm not trying to make a tourism advertisement here, but I just want to say, living in the midst of the most beautiful landscape and natural environments and going out in nature also drives me, to remind me. So on the one hand, to remind myself what we are capable of as humans. On the other hand, to remind myself what it is that I'm fighting for here.
Obviously, also people who have sensibilities and feelings and can enjoy the beauty of the nature and be touched by music or stories or you name it. So it's not for everybody then necessarily a route to understanding. Maybe I'm putting it a bit sharply now, but you know what I mean?
No, I see what you mean. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think my colleague, Catherine Hayhoe, or my colleague, climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe, is one of the best people at making those kind of efforts. And her stance is that the way to reach people who at this point are still unsure or are adamant about not wanting to act upon climate change is to find common ground and to find common values. Those values might not be, science or addressing climate change, but as you mentioned, everyone has values. Everyone has something that they care about. And finding common ground there is the way to do it. But that requires a lot of patience. Not my strong suit. Yeah.
No, and it sounds like almost going door to door and really starting to talk to people and figure out what do you care about, what do you think is important, what makes you, what's at stake for you. Almost. So
Yeah.
indeed, it takes a lot of effort. Just, I don't want to let go of the music yet. There's some pop songs in it, but I also learned that you are some kind of opera buff, right?
I am. Yeah. Well, it's again one of these things where I wish I have I personally have zero musical talent. Absolutely not. It baffles me how anyone can make music and can sing music and compose music. And so especially when writing. So I love popular music as well, but I can't write with popular music. It's too distracting. But I found that opera actually puts my brain in the right wave for creative activity, which is puts me in the flow. It's a very nice thing. And there's
Was it a taste acquired, or was it like love at first sight?
not at all, rather the contrary. So yeah, there's if you look here, sorry, other side. There's a photo. I'll stop pointing. There's a photo of my dad on the top shelf who passed away a few years ago. But he was a very big opera buff, and he would every Sunday afternoon, the opera, he liked it very loud, so he would play opera through the entire house. But it's not, it is acquired taste. I don't know if there's any kids who really enjoy opera. Also, he liked Wagner and the really like hardcore screaming ladies and men. So as a kid, I was not a fan of opera at all. And he took me to a live opera. That's where the magic happened for me, because I don't know how it happened or how I didn't realize this before, but you actually, when you go live, you see people sing and this beautiful sounds come out of people's mouths, and they're acting at the same time, and the whole atmosphere is there. I mean, it's kind of like where you're sitting. The whole atmosphere of being in such a concert hall it's magical. So that's where I started to get it.
Okay, we've touched upon a number of things. Before we look ahead to the future and paint your utopia, perhaps, is there something you want to tell us that we need to know about climate change at this point in time? For example, in relation to Corona, is it linked at all or not? And what needs to be done right now, what we all can do or should be doing?
I think whether or not there's a link with Corona, it's too early to say. I mean, if you or it might be very complicated if there is a link. If you think of, for instance, there is a whole field of research looking at whether the plague, the Black Plague in the past, was related to climate change, but they're pandemics. They're big complex diseases that cannot be linked to climate in one place at one point in time. That it's complex. I think what Corona and its the reaction to it has taught me is a couple of things. One thing that I appreciate about what's going on is that there's the refound trust in expertise and experts and scientific expertise. When the push comes to shove, you need experts to be telling you what they know, and then you need politicians to make the best decisions to the extent of their knowledge, based on that scientific expertise. With climate change, we have an advantage over Corona that, yes, it's happening fast, but at least it's not happening at the lightning speed that this pandemic has spread out. So we have a little more time. I think what is important is that we have so many solutions that we have already, that we have access to, but that we're not making use of. And that is, again, it's a function of policy. I think the best thing people can do is to vote for the people who can make decisions on a large scale. Like, I think what this Corona crisis has taught us is that, for 2 or 3 months in Europe, a lot of the public life has been shut down entirely. Transport has been shut down, flights have been shut down, people stay in their houses, no more commuting, a lot of the production has been shut down. and you see a blip in the carbon dioxide emissions worldwide. It has a very small effect only. As a matter of fact, right now, the carbon dioxide emissions are, again, higher than they've ever been. So what that teaches us is that, yes, people can make individual choices about how much carbon dioxide they are comfortable with emitting or not emitting, and those are important. But what is even more important are the big structural changes that individuals don't have a say over. You can't. There's things that you cannot, as an individual, invest in renewable energies versus nuclear energy. So I mean, you can to some extent, but not in the same way that governments can, for instance. So in that sense, what you can do is vote for those people who can make those decisions and are willing to make those decisions. And in that sense, I think one thing that strikes me often, for instance, in Belgium, is that climate change is still seen as or related to nature and wanting to save nature and biodiversity and that's where and ecology, and that's where the movement to act upon climate change originally came from. But what worries me about climate change is at this point, it's what it's going to be doing to us humans, to society. And I think that's where the impacts of climate change on people and on the economy, and anyone who is worried about the economy or about people or about society should be worried about climate change as well. This is not a problem that should be dealt with only by those who worry about nature.
Because what might happen to people and to society? What do you think? How will it impact humans or change us humans, our behavior, perhaps?
Our behavior, I don't. There's some research there, but that's not my field of expertise. But to me, very large scale thinking and speaking, more and more parts of the world are gonna be less pleasant to live, if not uninhabitable. With sea level rise, with the way temperatures are rising. At the same time, we are with a larger and ever-growing population. So we're gonna have to find a way to live in a smaller space with more people. We're not very good at that. And logically, the places where, people are going to want to live in the same place, where it's pleasant, where you don't have to deal with rising sea levels or hurricanes or
droughts,
heat.
or
Or drought, yeah, exactly. The same with agriculture, right? I mean, we're all used to, our food just coming on our plate. Well, not all, but we're not used to empty shelves in the supermarket, for instance. But the impact of climate change on agriculture should not be underestimated.
Yet you said the solutions are there. Can you tell us what the solutions are? I understand that you're not, in principle, against nuclear energy, for example.
I'm not. I call myself a climate pragmatist. We need to get the climate under control first and foremost. And at this point, I want to make clear, in the past, I have not been a proponent of nuclear energy. There are risks involved in it. Can't deny it. But we've pushed it so far with our carbon dioxide emissions that there is getting rid of nuclear was an option 10 years ago, 20 years ago. At this point, I don't know how we're going to make the transition fast enough. We need to get rid of carbon I think, in my opinion, before we get rid of nuclear. The way I see it is nuclear, yes, it's a risk. Carbon dioxide, it's a certainty. It's not a risk. It's a certainty that it's going to have bad impact.
There may be young people watching, hopefully, and listening to these conversations, and especially this one. What would your message to them be? Not to end perhaps on too bleak a note, or maybe yes, and try and engage them through that kind of message. What would you want to pass on to young people watching and listening?
I think young people are in the best position to think up in the world the way we would like for it to be. Like we are, we're not old, you and me, but we're set. We're used to certain things. We're used to, this is how we do it with fossil fuels, and and it's harder to think up other ways of doing it when you're set in your own ways. When you're young and you're not, they're in a better position to think outside of the box. That's really it. To be creative, to come back to that theme of this conversation, to be creative and think of ways in which we can live in a cleaner way, can live in a more just society and a more ethical society. I think it must be exciting. It is. And I want to repeat, this is also a very exciting time to live, even though it is a time of great uncertainty. But with uncertainty comes opportunities. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. If there is certainty, there's much fewer opportunities, or it's going to be harder to make use of those opportunities if you already know what all is going to happen.
This whole Corona business
yeah.
and the lockdown has opened a window, certainly at the beginning, where people felt like, okay, we can sit down now, think about how we want to do things differently in the future. Maybe that window is already closing with the loosening of the lockdown here and there. But how about you? Do you think you will change things in your life because of the experience of the Corona pandemic? Or do you think it will be business as usual before we know it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm going to have to change things, right? So I work in Arizona. My partner and my family lives in Florida. My mother and my sisters live in Belgium. I am not flying at the moment. I'm not flying transatlantically, especially not. So I've chosen to set up my life in a pre-Corona world. So I'm going to have to think about how to change that in a Corona infected world. But again, yeah, I'm flying less to conferences. I've not, I'm obviously not in Belgium right now, but I'm not going to conferences. I'm not planning on going to conferences, scientific conferences in the near future. That is new. That's not something that I'm used to. But I want to repeat, I feel very privileged that this is the only thing I need to be concerned about right now. So there will be changes, but I know I told the young people to make use of the opportunities that this uncertainty creates, but I'm also very well aware that uncertainty is stressful. It's hard to look at how things could be when there's so many moving parts.
It's a bit foggy at the moment, maybe, or to me at least it feels like that sometimes. Valerie Trouet, I want to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your ideas and ideals with us and your feelings about opera, amongst others. Thank you very, very much, and wish you all the best in Arizona, in the US. Thanks again for trying to repair the future here with us at BOZAR. Thank you.
Thank you, Annelies.